Okay, so now I want to talk about persistent infections. What happens when those viruses get in and some things that some viruses can do. So let's look at this slide. Some viruses come in, and we've talked about how they come in and then they end up by released by lysis or by budding. We are going to fight back. Our body is going to fight back against that. Our immune system is going to get rid of it, and eventually we'll get rid of it. But some viruses have a way to avoid our immune system and hide out so that our body can't get rid of this virus. And we'll refer to that as a persistent infection. What that means is that you get an initial infection, and let's talk two examples of this is the herpes simplex viruses and varicella zoster viruses, which are also called herpes zoster viruses, and those zoster viruses lead to chickenpox and shingles. So let's talk about a herpes infection. You can get type 1, type 2, you can get it at different parts of your body, on your mouth, genital areas. So let's just talk about a herpes simplex 1 virus that comes in and comes in contact with your mouth. So it will first invade epithelial cells. Remember that absorption, it has receptors on the epithelial cells that it can bind to. So that virus comes in and binds to these epithelial cells in your mouth. And does damage. It will leave by budding, and then it will find more epithelial cells and invade more epithelial cells. The initial cell, whether it leaves by lysis or budding, it's still going to die. Eventually, it's going to be damaged, and that's going to cause that blister that we see on your mouth, where you get that herpes blister that comes up. It's very easily diagnosed just by physical exam because of the distinctive characteristics of that blister. So that's your initial primary infection. But your immune system is making antibodies and is getting rid of that, and it will get rid of that, and epithelial cells regenerate. They will continue to replicate. So the ones that are healthy, that did not get infected, will replicate new epithelial cells, and your mouth will heal. And that's good. But during that, when our immune system is attacking it, this herpes simplex virus will actually start invading nearby nerve cells. So first it infects epithelial cells. As virions are released, it comes in contact with nerve cells, and this infection happens a little differently. It'll travel down these sensory neurons and invade a nerve cell. And now when it does that, unlike the epithelial cell, where it immediately makes more virions and causes this cell to die, in this case, when it gets to the nerve cell, it is actually going to integrate into the DNA. So I kind of recreated that little drawing here, and there's my epithelial cell, and infection has been going on, but now it is moved into the nerve cell. And so I've got a nucleus there, and I've got red, my DNA is in red, and that nucleic acid, the DNA nucleic acid from the herpes simplex virus, actually integrates into host DNA. Now, when that happens, we call that now a provirus. So this herpes simplex virus is now integrated and is referred to as a provirus. And now it just stays and sits and waits. All right, so your epithelial cells have healed. Your immune system got rid of it. Your mouth is healed. It's made fresh, new epithelial cells, and so that happens. But you can never get rid of this provirus sitting inside the nerve cells. Now, most of the time, your immune system in a healthy individual will keep that in check and will keep this provirus from coming out. But sometimes your immune system is not as healthy as it needs to be. Maybe you've gotten older. Maybe you're experiencing another illness. You've gotten something else and your immune system is fighting that. Maybe you are stressed and your hormonal balance is off. Maybe it's hormonal for cycle of the month for women, different variations in hormones. Again, stress and anxiety can cause a hormonal imbalance and other types of chemical imbalances. This is the provirus's chance. It can actually excise, come out of this nerve cell, move back down the ganglion, and start infecting epithelial cells again. This is why you get an initial outbreak and then it goes away, and then usually when you don't want it to, moments of stress, right before your wedding, right before an exam, it'll come back and it'll attack epithelial cells again, and you get that same damage that you did initially in those epithelial cells, and the same cycle will happen again. It'll go back into the nerve cells and integrate back into host DNA in the nerve cells. This is why you cannot be cured of herpes. It will stay and become a persistent infection, oscillating back and forth between activity and inactivity from that. Um, so that's how that works. We don't have any way to get rid of it because of how it does that. Um, uh, Chickenpox does the same way. Varicella zoster invades the skin, causes that initial pox that we know as chickenpox, but then it gets into the nerve cells and it stays. And now most of the time your body will keep it under check until you get old. And then as you get old, just like every other body system, your immune system doesn't work as well, can't keep it in check, and it'll come back. And when it comes back, instead of making those chicken pox like the initial infection, it comes back in this large rash, usually kind of localized in one area. That depends on where the virus integrated into your nerve cells. And we call this disease now shingles. So that's what happens with that. Hopefully somebody's going to do that on a case study and we'll get some more information. So that is an example of a persistent infection. Provirus is your vocabulary, viral DNA incorporated into the DNA of a host cell. These are very difficult viruses to get rid of and target, and it's another reason why we try to use vaccines in our fight against viruses versus drugs.